well, that's totally cool. Then you're all caught up. If you only listen to half of it, you're good. So, did you get the recording going?
Nope.
Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, we're only doing 3 sections on the actual story itself, so we're in 2 of 3. So, last time we left off with Luthien escaping from the treehouse, which was kind of a Rapunzel reference, where she just makes her hair go really, really long with her elven magic, and then she escapes. And her superpower is to put people to sleep, which she does frequently throughout the story. So we're introduced to a new character. In this segment of the story, we're introduced to Huan, the Hound of Valinor. And he came from the Blessed Realm, so he's a supernatural hound. So as Luthien is escaping, Huan finds her, and he brought her to the sons of Fëanor, and they held her hostage in hopes that she would not help Beren and Felagund. So they want those 2 to die, along with everybody that went with them. And they tried to, and they wanted to hold her hostage so they could strong-arm Thingol into allowing one of them to marry her, and hence increasing their status. So Celegorm specifically, now Huan actually belongs to Celegorm. He was given to Celegorm by the Valinor god of the hunt. So, but Huan, he is only permitted to speak 3 times in his life before he dies, and he gave Luthien counsel and helped her escape. So meanwhile, Felagund and Beren, they're still in Sauron's dungeons, and all of their companions are dead. When Sauron unleashed one of his werewolves on Beren, Felagund attacked it and killed it with his hands and teeth, but he was wounded to the death, so Beren's the only one left at this point. But Finrod Felagund kept his oath, so just how last time we were going on about how cool Finrod is, like this is an example, like he goes out like a boss. So as Luthien then approaches the area that Sauron has Beren held hostage in, she hears Felagund's last song, and sung a song of great power. And Sauron heard this, and he planned to capture Luthien by sending wolves after her, but Huan kept killing them, including Drauguan, who is the greatest of the wolves. So Sauron schemes to kill Huan by turning himself and taking the form of a werewolf. And Luthien and Huan, they ganged up on Wolf Sauron, and Huan pinned him to the ground by his throat. But Sauron then turned into a snake and tried to slither away, but they caught him anyway. And Luthien forced him to hand over ownership of the Isle of Werewolves to her. And Huan let Sauron go, and Sauron then took the form of a vampire, quote, great as a dark cloud across the moon. And then all of the captives from that isle were set free, and it says, quote, they were shielding their eyes from the pale moonlight. So then Beren and Luthien were reunited, and they buried Finrod Felagund. And when word of Sauron being bested reached Nargothrond, everybody revolted against the usurpers, that being said, the sons of Fëanor, and they got expelled, and they were very bitter about this. So they went after Beren and Luthien in hopes to kill Beren and kidnap Luthien, but Huan defended them. And in the Lay of Luthien, in the Tale of Tunavel, this scene has a lot more elaboration, but the gist of it is these 2 elves were in such shame and malice that they actually shot an arrow at Luthien, and Beren then took the arrow for her in his chest, and Luthien healed him with herbs and healed him with her love. And this is another power that Luthien has. So they went to Doriath, and Beren now has to choose between his integrity and love. So Thingol basically told him, if you give me a Silmaril, you can have my daughter. But at this point, Beren already has his daughter, has Luthien. So he could technically just dip out of his oath and not fulfill it. But because he's a man of honor he chooses to continue, and he doesn't want Luthien to come with him, and he sings her a farewell song. He leaves her behind. It's basically one of these, go back, Sam, I'm going to Mordor alone kind of things. So, but Luthien and Huon, they wanted to help him anyway, so they went after him. And Huon, it says, quote, long had pondered in his heart what counsel he could devise to lighten the perils of these two whom he loved. So now there's also a reference to a vampire named Orthingawel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but she was a vampire servant of Sauron, who is now dead, and she was a messenger of Sauron. So, but that's all we get from her. But Luthien takes the form of this dead enemy and disguises herself as it. So they found Beren, and they ended up progressing together. It says, so Luthien, she insisted on going with Beren into Angband, and when they get to Angband, the land of Morgoth, there was a guard there, and Luthien put him to sleep with magic. They come to the throne of Morgoth, and Luthien offered to entertain Morgoth, and she put him to sleep while Beren pried a Silmaril out of his crown with the dagger of Celeborn that he took from them when they attacked him. As they tried to escape with the jewel, a giant wolf that Luthien had put to sleep earlier, he was waken up by them, and he attacked them, and Luthien was drained at this point, so Beren, trying to protect her, held the jewel up into the face of the wolf, and the wolf just bit his hand off with the jewel in it. And this jewel was burning the wolf alive from the inside out, but the wolf didn't die right away. So Beren was bleeding out and dying because there was venom on the fangs of the wolf. Luthien sucked the venom out of the wound with her mouth, and they are both exhausted and drained, and they can't go any further, but eagles come to rescue them, which is a classic Tolkien trope, and that's where we'll leave off this time. So, Amanda, I wanted to get your thoughts on what Tolkien was saying about vampires here, because he didn't really go into a whole lot of detail. He didn't really give us much to work with.
But he really didn't.
What?
I hate to say that, but I think he was influenced by Hollywood.
You think so?
Well, yeah, because I mean, like, this whole vampire thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing is, I was gonna say, if I can interject for a second, is that like, it's interesting that Sauron just turns into a vampire, because like, that's not really what a vampire is in essence, right? It's like a curse.
Right.
It's not, it's like,
It's an ontological change of being.
right. So it's like, it's an interesting thing to change into, right? So I think.
He's an evil spirit, right? Like,
Yeah, and it doesn't describe him as a bat. It describes him as like a dark, shadowy thing. Yeah. But I just thought it was weird because it wasn't like he transformed into a shadow creature or he transformed into a man bat. It was specifically he transformed into a vampire, which is a very odd thing to choose.
Well, it says the blood was dripping from his throat onto the tree, but that's because he got mangled by Huon.
There's a real interesting theme of like transformation going on. With all of the werewolves stuff that's happening,
And then all this skin shit.
Luthien is somehow transforming herself to look like dead enemies, and Sauron transforming multiple times, and I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing. I wasn't really sure what to make of it.
And then there's an epic song battle.
Yeah, that was.
It's problems.
Because the demons want bodies.
Yeah. Right.
That's why they possess people. To mock, because they want to mock Christ, who became incarnate.
Right. So the shape changing that where it's and
Yeah, so you think that he was influenced by Hollywood in terms of Sauron turning into a vamp? Because, like, does it say back in Silmarillion?
No, not Hollywood. Joker.
Okay. No, I mean, Tolkien's portrayal of them. Okay. It's interesting, like, he started, now in your version, because Cody is reading the 1917 version, does it mention vampires in your version? I'm trying to remember.
No.
It doesn't. Okay, so then maybe that's a
I mean,
later.
Sauron's not even in my version.
Well,
Because he's a
cat.
he's a demonic cat
Man.
named Telvito.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very, very different version.
Yes. Well, he is a cat in
Baphomet.
the other version.
Yeah.
And Baphomet.
This is this is
Oh yeah, the human.
an older version. Like, it was actually like one of the first things that Tolkien wrote
More Bulgari.
when he was still in World War One.
Yeah. Would have been before Bulgakoth, but whatever.
But yeah, Sauron doesn't exist. But Melkor or Melko has a lieutenant who is a cat, and his sole job is to catch mice for food. And so
okay.
he takes Beren under his service because Beren is a trapper, and he like forces Beren to capture mice for food for
He turns him into a ball.
yeah, basically.
To a cat.
Isn't Tolkien might be referencing there's a famous sermon in the streets. Have you ever heard like books being I would say something really could be where basically describes
It wouldn't surprise me if he. I mean, I can't confirm or deny that. I just don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me because we do know he was very familiar with that period of history. But yeah, in terms of Huon, like Huon's one of my favorite characters because he is literally like a hound of heaven, and I kind of like how there's this conflict between the demonic werewolves of Sauron and the Hound of Heaven, basically like the wolves of Satan, like the wolf of souls versus Lupus Dei, you know, and he's only permitted to speak 3 times before he's allowed to die, which I find interesting, and I wondered if anybody had any thoughts on that. Well, he was.
I do think it's interesting that they're playing both sides. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, basically. It's also an interesting point because he chooses to use his 3 times here.
Yeah.
In this instance, and it says that he's very old, like he's been around with what is it?
He's one of the wolfhounds of Orome, who's the hunter god of the Valar.
And so basically he's been around for all time.
He's older than the sun.
And just for some reason, Beren and Luthien have moved him enough to use this thing, which is going to kill him in the end.
Yep.
So that kind of is, I think, their way of like showing how significant this event is.
Yeah.
Also, there's another point later. This gets away from the animal stuff, but when Beren's finally getting the Silmaril, he has a moment where he's like, well, I think I can just get all 3 of them now. Like, this dude's sleeping, I pried one out, why can't I pry the other 2? And this magical knife that he has suddenly breaks when he tries to get more than one. It's a really interesting moment.
And not only does it break, but one of the pieces like hits Morgoth on the face and wakes him up. Yeah.
So it's like he's only allowed to do what he was set out to do.
Yeah.
It's
Give
like,
me a Silmaril.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting because like you would think like even with the will of Eru Ilúvatar being on his side, like he'd be able to get all 3 because these are like the equivalent of like holy relics.
But even so, like in real life, we lose holy relics somehow for our sanctification. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah.
But
But
in this case, you could look humility thing or there's a lot of talk in this about destiny and fate and so on and so forth. Right? The other Silmarils might be assigned elsewhere. In the great plan, etc.
and they're also dangerous. So maybe the bad guy having him is the best plan.
Right, they are dangerous and they carry a person who can take them from ambition. They have reserve these habits, so even though some of them themselves
Yeah. Don't kill me.
It's a great purpose.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a purpose to it. I don't know if you know what before, but I think this is possible task.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. It's almost like that scene in Indiana Jones when he starts reaching for the Grail, and then Sean Connery just has to tell him to let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I think that like that's why I always say like people say this is an epic love story, and yeah, it kind of is, but like that's not the crux of the story. Like it's a story of cosmic purpose, and that's the one trope that seems to be like the golden thread running through all of Tolkien's lore is you have the sovereignty of Eru Ilúvatar and the agency of his recreation being pit against the works of the devil, essentially, that wants to take the free will away from everybody.
Well, I'd argue back a little bit on that too and say that actually it shows the significance of love. It is a love story, and it's showing how important love is.
How it is sovereignly ordained.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
Love is a cosmic power.
Yeah, well, that's something we were talking about last week, Amanda. Is how like Beren and Luthien have no business being in love at all whatsoever.
Right.
Luthien is 3,000 years old. Beren's a regular dude, and
Right.
how like whenever Luthien saw him, you probably remember it says like a doom fell upon her. She's like, oh man, I love him. There must be some crazy purpose as to why this is the case. And then I'm not sure if you looked up the family tree, but basically Luthien is Arwen's great great grandmother.
Right.
And then the same story kind of repeats in the third age.
Because Eru Ilúvatar loves men first.
It's true.
Right.
As a matter of fact,
Elves are nice, but elves exist for the purpose of helping man.
elves are not meant to inherit the earth.
Well, the earth is all they inherit.
Well, they leave and go back to the undying lands.
But even that is earth. Because the elves don't know what happens to their souls. I mean, the aftermath. I can never get the full name down. the conversation between I think Fingarfin and a human woman who was brokenhearted because she loved an elf prince, but he rejected her. And they were both sort of together having a deep dialogos. They had a deep conversation about death and mortality and what it is. Because the elves considered it a great gift to man, while men considered it a curse. And so it's a deep conversation within Tolkien's mythos about what is mortality and what is the will of Ilúvatar. And what is the destiny of man and of elves?
Well, there's a place in the appendices, there's a section called Morgoth's Ring, or it's in a text called Morgoth's Ring, where Tolkien explains in an appendice how the Middle Earth was created to be inherited and stewarded by man, but men failed. So then Eru Ilúvatar will become a man so that men can do that. And that's where that's where the most explicitly Christian thing he ever writes is, basically.
The incarnation.
Yes, but
Which
that
is
not in any of his narratives, it's just in an appendices.
Yep.
Right, because all of his stuff is like pre-Christian.
Yeah,
Like somebody once described to me the Silmarillion as the Old Testament of Tolkien's work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fair way to describe it. I mean, there's a creation story, and then there's,
Which would make the Lord of the Rings what? Maccabees?
Yeah.
I meant to do this the other week, but there's like a direct quote in here from Tolkien about Beren and Luthien, so I'll just read that real quick.
Please do.
The outlaw mortal who succeeds Where all armies and warriors have failed, he penetrates the stronghold of the enemy and wrests one Silmaril from the iron cloud. Thus he wins the hand of Luthien, and the first marriage of mortal and immortal is achieved. That was like his...
Kentucky.
Yeah. Basically, when he was asked, like, what is the point of this story, like, that was the brief description he gave.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
It's all about this joining of mortal and immortal.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and there was in your version actually, when Celeborn and Curupin attack Beren and Luthien, and Huan goes to defend them, and Beren takes that arrow for Luthien. In the Silmarillion version, it's just kind of briefly described, but in your version, it's elaborated on more. And there's something Beren does where he dodges a spear and leaps onto a horse to rescue Luthien, and then takes an arrow in the process. And it went on to be sung about by elves in a song called "The Leap of Beren."
Yeah.
Shouldn't there be like a super director's cut or what? Wait, what do they call it? The synoptic? Yes, there should be a synoptic version.
We were just talking about that on the
Yeah.
way over, because, like, this version that came out in 2017,
Has cool bits.
it's like looking at a map with, like, layers, and it's like you have to read the same story like 3 or 4 times, but at different levels. And then you have to take every level and condense it down and look at it like from a bird's eye view to see the whole layout.
Yeah, it's like those. It's like those kind of like blueprints where they're like paper thin.
Yeah.
And then you just press them down onto each other,
Yeah.
and you can see the whole thing.
Yeah, that's what this is. But we were saying, why wouldn't he have just made basically a supercut where he takes all the bits from each version
All the extra bits
and like
put them together.
to make a coherent thing?
He was a cat, then he was a vampire cat, and then and they ate mice, but actually they got eaten by werewolf. And then Penrod Pelican does some Solomon Kane stuff and boink.
Yeah.
Amanda, you're a writer, so do you ever do anything like that where you like have a story that you maybe have written multiple times and you kind of like take bits and pieces and mash it into one thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Christopher Tolkien would have had to alter some of the language, because if you go through like the Tale of Cinnavel or Lay of Luthien, and then you go through the Silmarillion version, it's like there's a lot more rhymes in the older versions. It's like it really is like an epic poem in the classic sense of the word, where it's like a poem that epic just means really, really long and like thousands of lines. And
In this, the Lay of Luthien in this book is longer than of Beren and Luthien is in the Silmarillion.
yeah, 100%.
And that's just a poem about the story.
yeah.
So that's
Right.
the really kind of interesting thing.
Yeah, but that's just part of the lore of this, in terms of like the things that happen in this story get turned into songs and like almost like pseudo akathists like later in the Legendarium, which is kind of cool.
It's like in the Fellowship when Aragorn is singing the Lay of Luthien.
Yeah, we just saw that last weekend. Amanda, we were rewatching the extended version of the Fellowship, and there's a scene where Aragorn is singing the Lay of Luthien, and like Frodo's like, "What are you singing?" And he was like, "Lay of Luthien, dude."
Whatever version, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, so everybody who is coming to this book study that watched that movie just got the book spoiled for them, but it is what it is. This
Yeah.
this story is over 100 years old at this point. Yeah. You know, one thing too that I noticed this time reading this story that I didn't notice before is like just how Pelegorm and Curfin, like they really are scumbags. Like they are villains in this story. Like Morgoth is a villain, but at the same time though, these two elves that were like when we first read about them in the story, they were trying to usurp Finrod Felgen, who was a legitimately cool elf. And these two guys are trying to take his throne while he's away, and then him and Beren go out. They get captured by Sauron, and then their whole thing is to kidnap Luthien so that she doesn't help them. So they die, and then when they finally find them, it's almost like whenever Huon is defending them, because like this only occurred to me now. It's like Huon was given to Celegorm by the gods. Like this is a hound of heaven given to this son of Fëanor for his use, but because Huon is he's not like a loyal dog. I don't like that because he is very loyal, but he's loyal to the transcendent purpose of the gods of Eru-Ilúvatar because he betrays his master when he is sent out to capture Luthien. He then defends Luthien from his master because his master wants to kidnap Luthien to leverage Thingol into allowing him to marry her to elevate the status of his house. So he's just power hungry. But Huon knows that. So he then turns on his own master and serves Beren and Luthien. And then Celegorm is left in such spite that he tried to kill Luthien, the woman that he was just trying to marry. So that's something I didn't really like. I knew it happened, but I didn't really think about it much until this time around. But yeah, elves can be scumbags too.
Actually, my whole thing when I was looking at it was like how people was acting or everything. So I said, man, this is being the ones that were Phil, Kenny, and Mark,
Wait, what? I missed something.
What is it?
All of their eyebrows from the fork.
yeah, no, because
Olin is from what story? Okay, it's a Welsh. That makes all the sense in the world.
yeah.
Really? I thought there'd be more. I thought there'd be more W's. More W's than extra vowel. And G's where they don't belong. Wild.
So what was the story you were referencing earlier? Okay, and so how is Thingol similar to them? Is you saying that there's parallels between the character of Thingol and one of those characters? Okay. Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of pagan stories where and then he killed her father and they got married and everything was fine. Like, no.
Well, I'd say in the Russian fairy tales, beat your wife until she loves you. You're like, that's not hard.
Yeah, that'll give her Stockholm syndrome. That's about it. Sounds like Slavic fairy tale.
Slavic fairy tales also have like deep, like mythical understanding of things. So they're not like Aesop's fables, but they are difficult for modern people to interpret because the medium is so strong.
Yeah, that one's definitely like, oh man.
Yeah, well, since this is your first time joining the class on this particular book, what do you make of Luthien so far? She's kind of her personality is a little bit nebulous. We just know that she has basically these powers of supernatural love that she can use to heal people. She can put people to sleep.
She's half angel.
Yes, but Mhm.
Female characters than like the Italian right? Some of the others where usually the woman part of the couple is able to help, right? So that's all kind of like the part of the
Mhm. Yeah, well, there's other reasons for that too, but keep going.
Yeah, and there's more singing later. She sings real good.
Yeah, and also there's a parallel between her and Rapunzel. Like there isn't, and I'm not just talking about the way she escaped that treehouse, because I mean that's kind of an obvious one. But the other one is if you read the fairy tale of Rapunzel, the prince is wounded and he is actually blinded by the end of the story. But she finds him, Rapunzel, and then she cries into his eyes, and then his sight is restored, so she can heal with her tears. And Luthien, at least in the part that we went through of the story today, when Beren gets infected by the venom from the gigantic wolf that bit his hand off, she is able to suck the venom out with herself and not be affected by it while keeping him from dying. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember, I think she also might heal with her tears as well. So that's another parallel between her and Rapunzel.
all right, but
No.
Well, that happened in the War of the Roses with the king on one side and the princess of the other side, and that's one of the things that helped bring the war to an end.
That's very funny. Well, I was gonna say like the image of healing with tears is a literal physical manifestation of compassion.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it's in an Anakathis somewhere.
Well, I mean, our icons cry more that has healed people, so it's not like this defend thing.
It's a beautiful thing because like all the best feminine archetypes are of course foreshadows, and and Spermaticus logo of the Theotokos, and so it's yeah. You,
Well, what were you going to say before about Florence Nightingale syndrome, or something you mentioned around that?
that's what it means. It means when a woman cares for an injured
Yeah.
man, then yeah. Yep. A lot of French nurses learn to speak English.
Yeah, what's interesting is, like, I know you didn't read Two Way Up Faces, but I instantly started noticing parallels between Psyche and Luthien when going through Two Way Up Faces, because, like, she can heal people by touching them, and I can't remember this precisely, but I do believe she could cause flowers to grow somehow.
Well, for sure, because think about the fact that when they go to take her to be sacrificed and she's gone from the valley, they have like a terrible drought.
Yes.
Everything dies in the land
Yeah.
while she's absent.
Yeah, and which is interesting, 'cause, like, for Luthien, it makes sense. Like, her mother is an angel that, is the product of how, like, the music is woven into the fabric of Middle Earth. So it only makes sense that her music is so profound to where she can dispel winter and make flowers grow and everything like that, because, like, her mother is basically a sub-creator of Eru Luvatar. But Psyche is almost like not like that at all, really, in terms of her lineage. Like, she comes from a father who's a tyrant and a woman who is kind of a nobody. But that's why my theory, even though I can't prove it, I guarantee Lewis and Tolkien must have talked to each other about these female archetypes, because both of their idealistic women in their stories encompass these same tropes that are probably stemming from the same literature.
Yeah, well, because it's.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's also like due to like the tail end of the Victorian period and the start of like the next stage of modernity after the Great War. Like, I mean, at that point, the Western world and in England in particular just became like mechanical and like hyper masculine, hyper ordered, and like that's why like the whole arts and crafts thing. And like I think there's something that I don't know that either of them really wrote about like directly, but the Western world was missing the beauty of the feminine in a way that wasn't just some like adulterous thing. Like the beauty of purity was like, I think something both of them felt was missing from the world that they knew.
I mean, but the attractiveness of people, women are able to
I think it's because they removed the Theotokos, and because they removed the Theotokos, they either tried to expel the feminine entirely, or to find a way to master it, or to misplace it.
Dr. David Bradshaw has an essay about just that, as to like why all of this sexual chaos was erupting in the West, specifically in England, but not so much in Orthodox countries at the time. And he basically grounds it in the Theotokos, that they basically lost reverence for the Theotokos and purity and chastity, and that's why they went off the rails in that sense.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
But yeah, the thing too about this is like Luthien is arguably the most powerful character in this story.
Oh yeah.
But
I just feel like Galadriel's
well, yeah, but one interesting trope that this story does seem to embody is like there's all these love stories about, you know, whatever, this king falls in love with this girl who's, you know, like, you know, maybe a peasant or whatever, something like that. I mean, it's a very common trope of like the powerful, dangerous guy and like, you know, the innocent little girl or whatever. But for this one, it's almost like you have this guy, granted, Beren's not like totally a nobody, like he does come from a proud house, but everybody in his house is dead, like they've all been slaughtered. And Luthien is half goddess, and they really have no business being together, but...
Oh, it's a knight's tale. A knight has no business marrying a princess, really. But, because, I mean, sure, they're nobility, but they're pretty far down there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, yeah.
But in terms of the quest itself, though, like, one thing I was surprised about when I first read this story when I was a teenager is Luthien does tend to do her fair share of heavy lifting, but she's never tyrannical with her power. Like, she only uses her power to nurture, which is something that I actually found very, very interesting. Because, like, you know, we were just talking about, like, before we started, we were talking about, like, feminism, the modern movement, all this stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of hope this story never gets made into a movie by filmmakers today, because they would so wreck it and they would probably just make it feminist, because they'd say, oh, look, Luthien has all this power, she, therefore, girl power. So but it's like, that's not what Tolkien was really doing with this.
It was something sacred and pure.
Yes. It's something that runs very, very deep. So, were there any more thoughts about this segment of the story?
Oh, I guess I could quickly bring up about what we were talking about, like the Silmarillion being similar to relics.
Yeah, by all
and
means.
the touch
Yeah, please do.
aspect where it's like, in the way we think about relics, like they kind of illuminate a space, right? Like they have an area of influence in a way. Like it's not just the object, like you're in the presence of the object.
Yeah.
But in this story,
The person.
the thing that is interesting is like the Silmarils, which are holy objects, maybe you could even call them like similar to
Secondary.
the Ark,
Yeah.
in the way that,
Or they have a word term of like secondary relics.
well, the Silmarils in this literally contain,
Right. The light of the
The
trees.
light of the trees.
Like graves. Like there's no
they're
person
in the
associated
crown, they're in the crown of
with
the
them.
ultimate evil here,
Yeah.
and they're like right there, but they don't have any influence over him. And when the Silmaril is in Beren's hand, and the werewolf bites his hand, nothing happens. Like the werewolf like kind of laughs it off. But the second he bites Beren's hand off, and the Silmaril like comes in contact with him, he's like lit on fire with like
From the inside. It's like a
it's
coal.
like holy fire. Like,
Holy
fire. So there's it only works when they touch it, and I wonder if that's why Melkor is not affected by the Silmarils, even though they're technically diametrically opposed to his being.
And
Well,
yeah, maybe that's the thing. Like they're in his crown. He's not actually touching. I'm not touching you. I'm not.
it's an armor form too. It's not an armor form.
Right.
But he put them in his crown though, right? Because he made that crown out of his collar.
Well, no, that crown later gets beaten into a collar. That when
Oh.
they flood Balerion later,
Yeah.
the gods.
Yeah, I don't know if it doesn't necessarily say that he put them there.
But he clearly but he wanted them. He went after the Silmarils.
Yeah, he started a whole bunch of civil wars, so the elves would
And
kill each other over
infighting.
them, and then he maneuvered them and finessed them to a position where he could get them.
Yeah. And one by one, as they started killing each other, and they started dripping down to him.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't know, I just thought it was an interesting section because obviously it's like he can be in the presence of it, but at the same time, when the Silmaril comes in contact with evil, it like destroys it.
And you know, going back to the blade of Telegorm that Beren was using to pry the Silmarils from the crown, it's interesting how like these objects play a role in keeping the characters on track. It's almost like Iluvatar is working through these objects.
Who had their hands blackened by the Silmarils?
Good question, I don't know.
I don't remember if that was Sauron or Morgoth. One of them went to grab one, and it burned their hand black, and it was black ever since.
I don't know.
I thought it was the black hand of Morgoth.
But going off what you said about how like relics, like they're kind of like these pseudo relics in Tolkien's world. What's interesting is like how, you know, we believe that, you know, grace can dwell in physical objects and that the will of God can be, I guess, performed or supplemented or aided by these objects. Like God can use objects to perform His will, and it's like I think we're seeing that same kind of thing in this story with these objects. Whether it's the dagger that broke so that, you know, Beren couldn't get a second Silmaril, or whether it's the Silmarils themselves. You know, I think they're functioning in a very similar way.
Yeah, so on one hand, the dagger breaking was sort of like a punishment and a humiliation to Beren, but on the other hand, it was a mercy.
Yeah.
Because if he had gotten the other ones, I mean, big problems.
Right. Yeah, and the Silmarils, it's like, I'm torn on the Silmarils. I don't quite know how to interpret them, whether these things are like pure evil, because like they contain light, which is intrinsically good, but then it said Fëanor, when he crafted them, he poured so much of himself into them, and who he was not exactly the best guy.
No.
So
Because Fëanor's a bad dude.
he's a very bad dude, yeah. But it's almost like, are the Silmarils good or bad? You know,
Yeah.
we know they have power, but are they good or bad? It's an ambiguous question. You know,
Does it really describe Fëanor before he crafts the Silmarils though?
yeah, it
Like,
does.
is he?
He's covetous already.
Yeah, he's very ambitious and he's very proud. He was the best craftsman that elves had ever known.
He was the best
Yeah.
craftsman that Howley had ever taught.
Yeah,
The
that's-
god of
Very
smithing.
tough though too, because you could also take the angle of Iluvatar use the hand of a bad man to craft something good.
You could take that view as well.
You could.
It's an ambiguous question because it's like when Beren grabs a Silmaril, it doesn't hurt him. It says it turns his hand into a shining lamp. But then like when something evil, like this gigantic werewolf, you know, swallows a Silmaril, it starts burning his guts. So it's like these things are kind of good, but at the same time though, they're also kind of cursed in a way. Like,
Well, I don't know. It's kind of like grace, right? Like, how do we describe hell in the church?
yeah,
Hell is like one's like full exposure to the love and grace and beauty of God, but you hate it.
It's facing the full force of God without him.
Yeah. And so in a similar way, like, the Silmarils are good and beautiful, and are there any, there's no instances in the Silmarils who lead people, are there?
Not that I know of.
Not that I know. But there's something of the divine light in them. Although, like, the divine light taken away from its source, and it's kind of like division, right? The devil, the divider. And so Feanor took something that belonged to the trees and put it in jewels. And so on one hand, you could say it's like worshiping like the heart of Christ. Like, what are you doing worshiping the heart of, it's Christ. Christ is a whole person. Like, what's this business with his heart?
Interesting.
There is also the element too that it's all that remains of the light of the trees, because Ungoliant basically sucked all the light out of the trees, and the only light left is in those
jewels. Yeah. So it's why it's a good myth, because myths are ambiguous, and that's okay.
Yep.
It means there's multiple layers of meaning that you have to like mill through at the same time.
Yep.
That's what makes a myth good and rememberable. Memorable. There we go.
Yeah. Well, we're back on this segment of the story that we went through before we wrap this up. Any other thoughts, Amanda?
No, you a lot more, you have a lot more context now. But
Is this your first time going through this story? I don't hear that.
Amanda?
Are you still there?
yeah,
Okay, is this your first time going through this story?
yeah.
Okay. Alright, well, I mean, are you liking it so far? Okay. Alright, cool. Yeah, we're gonna finish up the story next time.